military people have so much. I think it's only looking back on it now that I realise the experiences that I had and how they translate into in political life now. So watching stuff happening in the House of Commons, and I was on a specialist team up in Scotland at the time. We deployed within 6 hours. So you saw politics happening in real time, and then you were the sharp end of that delivery.
Welcome to the Veterans in Politics podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Ball, and I've served on the front line of military operations, as well as the very different front line of UK politics. This week's guest is former Royal Marine Commando David Reid MP. Now, David began his political journey right here on this show. Before the show became a podcast, we were a series of webinars, and he was one of the people that popped along to one of those webinars, and now look at him, he's a Member of Parliament. So for him to share that story on this week's episode was a truly humbling moment for this show. We cover his journey into politics, of course. We also cover what the transferable skills he has that he's brought over from a very heavily operational military career into the world of politics too. Now, if this is your first time listening to the show, please do catch up on about 90 episodes that we've done until today. And also, we've got some brilliant ones coming up. So don't forget to hit subscribe, because that means they're going to drop right into your podcast provider so you can listen to them first. But for now, without further ado, it's time for you to meet our guest, David Reid. Welcome to Veterans in Politics. And I understand that you've been a follower of the show. In fact, you're one of the originals because you dialed in back in lockdown on a webinar. Is that right?
I did. Johnny, it's great to be on. So I did. Back in 2022, I think it was, when the pandemic was in sort of full swing. I was seriously considering politics at that point. And then your name popped up and started to listen to your podcast, had loads of MPs come on that you were speaking to, and just sort of explain the process and how to get into politics and your tagline, how to serve again. It was very useful. So thank you from the off.
Well, I have to say, I wasn't expecting that. When you mentioned that in our pre-chat before we came on today, that really kind of hit me. And it's exactly why I started evangelising about the prospect of veterans standing up to serve again in their communities. So to see it actually pay off in Parliament, and to see the diverse mix of politicians now in Parliament from across the main parties is really, truly humbling, because we started to see a change. But we've also seen a lot of Royal Marines, right, in Parliament, and that's where your story connects with our armed forces. So tell us about, why did you join the Royal Marines in the first place?
The Marines are doing very well in politics, so yeah, we'll go into that afterwards. But going into the Royal Marines, I joined straight after sixth form. I was 18 years old. And this is sort of 2008. Afghan had been going on for quite a while. And I think for a lot of my generation, 9/11 and all the events that took over from that period with the global war on terror, it must have had an impact, because I was fascinated by Afghanistan. And I was thinking and sort of making decisions around sort of sixth form, upper sixth, and it was either go to university, and this was when all of those sort of, and we won't get into party politics, but all those sort of Labour party politics policies came out around education. So it was saying 50% of school leavers need to go to university. And I remember thinking at the time, and I'm one of six, I've got elder brothers and sisters, they'd all gone to university. And I was like, right, well, where are the jobs afterwards? And who's going to pay for all of these people going to university? And I wasn't 100% sure on what I wanted to do at 18. So I thought, right, I'll join up, I'll go to the Marines, I'll do 4 years, I'll go to Afghanistan, get some life experience, and then go to university afterwards. And I absolutely loved it. So I ended up staying for 7 years, did a few extra tours. I did counter-piracy off the coast of Somalia, did Libya during the Arab Spring, and then eventually did Afghan. And then, very fortunately, I wasn't known to me, that the Marines, or the armed forces in general, do a scheme where they'll send people to university. So they're able to sort of pick up the fees. So in both ways, it worked really well.
And is it right that, particularly in the Royal Marines, there's quite a high bar of education? You'll find, I mean, from my own experience, I found that Marines that weren't commissioned tended to have quite a high level of education. Is that a fair enough assessment of the Royal Marines?
Yeah, I think it all. The good thing about the Marines, and you find this with other units in the armed forces, where it's a meritocracy. No one really cares where you came from or what your educational standard is. There is a standard, and you have to meet that standard. And if you can't be there. But I think the level of soldiering, they call it thinking man soldiering, I think that applies to most of the armed forces. But I think going into the Marines, yeah, seeing people coming in with degrees, with high levels of education, and serving at every rank in the Marines, that was very evident. I think it's even more evident now, where we go back to that point about those Labour policies back in the early 2000s. So many people have gone to university now. They've come out afterwards. They've not really wanted to use their degree, and they've seen the forces as a route forward. And it's brilliant they are doing that.
And with your generation of Royal Marines, I think it transcends into civilian life, where the culture of the Royal Marines extends across different generations. I mean, the Royal Marines did a fair amount of heavy lifting during Afghanistan, but from your experience, did you see a kind of a handover, say, from the Falklands generation? What's that interactivity like from Lympstone all the way through your career, and when you leave, across the different conflict generations like?
So I think the Royal Marines is quite a special organisation. You're sort of plugged into 360 odd years of history, and it's taught extensively at Lympstone. And they do a really good job of bringing back those different veterans from different conflicts as mentors as you're going through training. So you feel that deep connection to people around the country, around the Commonwealth that have served in these different conflict zones. And it gives you that sort of sense of grounding in history, which I think is really valuable for a military unit.
Yeah, and we're starting to see people like yourself show up in prominent positions. Indeed, the first Sea Lord now is a Royal Marine. I mean, how do you think that landed?
Every time I'm in Parliament, you see Marines everywhere. So we've got 4 in Parliament. 4 in the House of Commons. So Al Ballinger, Fred Thomas, Al Carnes, and myself. You've got a member of the House of Lords who's former Royal Marine. Blackrod, who I was with this morning, is a former Royal Marine. You have now 2 heads of services. So you've got the First Sea Lord, and then Cyber and Special Operations Command is another former Royal Marine. So they seem to be everywhere.
Well, so I think
it will be stamped out quickly, I have no doubt.
So I think there's a bit of a virtuous insurgency of green-lidded people across society at the moment. So for anyone listening, and you meet a veteran, then there's a good chance there'll be a Royal Marine, because they seem to be on the move across society at the moment. But in all seriousness, you mentioned that there are 4 members of Parliament that are from the Royal Marines now, which sees a marked change from the last Parliament, where you were kind of absent in your numbers, and that's a real positive change. But did you ever serve with any of the other 3?
No, never came into contact. So I spent time at Special Forces Support Group. I think I was in the sort of like periphery of Al, but I was working more with Hereford at the time. And I did Libya with Paul. And I think he was sort of like he must have been there, but we never came into contact with each other. And the Marines is one of those sort of like weird places that if you're not in the same unit, you rarely see each other.
And it's not, talking, what do you want to do? I want to be an MP. It's not really something that comes up around, in the junior ranks mess or the officers mess, or the, junior ratings having a chat over a brewery or a wet. Sorry, make sure I get that right. Royal Marines out there.
Very good.
I'll be absolutely hounded if I don't say wet, as you have a sip of your wet. But but I always say to people, I've had a lot of veterans say to me, I'm not political, and then they explain their views and exactly why they are political, because of course we exercise the political will of a nation. So my argument is, you are at the sharp end of political delivery. We are political even when we're serving, albeit we might not exercise party political views. But do you think, from your experience, you heard people express their views, maybe not party political, but strong opinions? And I think we encourage our junior ranks to have opinions culturally these days, particularly on operations. Did you kind of get a sense that people have got so much to give, to serve again, as we've just discussed, once they leave?
The military people have so much. I think it's only looking back on it now that I realise the experiences that I had and how they translate into in political life now. So if I look back at some of the operational tours, and I was so focused on I wanted to get as much experience as possible. I wanted to travel the world. And the Marines is one of those organisations where you can bounce around units to be able to go and find where those opportunities are. But if I look back at Somalia and sort of see what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz at the moment, so shipping lanes are closed off, you understand these spaces, you understand what the global response needs to be to get things opened again. These are similar problems that we were dealing with in 2010. I'd sailed through the Strait of Hormuz multiple times on that operation. If I look back at Libya, I remember watching stuff happening in the House of Commons, and I was on a specialist team up in Scotland at the time. We deployed within 6 hours to go out and do the initial evacuation from Benghazi. So you saw politics happening in real time, and then you were the sharp end of that delivery. And then Afghanistan, you're working on sort of strategic target sets, and you can see the whole system sort of plugging into each other. And I think when I look back on it, I was so young at the time. So I think I left at 24 and a half, 25. You're not really thinking about that stuff at that age. It wasn't until sort of later jobs and later careers that I had that I really started to see the value of that experience, and then started to see how it applied to other work that I was doing. But if you speak to most military people, they have similar experiences. And when you really sort of break down what that experience is and how it applies to other aspects of life, you realise how valuable that experience is.
Yeah, I think you're a participant. And even if you don't know it, I remember my first operational tour at 18, I was on the streets of West Belfast during the Good Friday Agreement. So the politics was omnipresent. It was all around us. You were part of it. And indeed, your actions could have had an indirect consequence on the peace process, given the scrutiny that we were all under. Because troops are on such scrutiny in the age of 24-hour media, digital proliferation of news. It's important that our standards and our behaviours are at the highest levels possible, because we are a part of that political, when we serve, instrument. And I think also in Afghanistan, I actually had a weird experience because I mobilised from the reserves on a full-time reserve contract for 3 years. So I was actually at Chilwell mobilising back into the regular army, as it were, on the day of the general election in 2010. So I'd been working in politics, and then I was there going, well, actually, I'm leaving that bit behind now and going to exercise the political will, which was, of course, inevitably Afghanistan. So tell us about a little bit of, I was going to say, what drew you to Exmouth and Exeter? You're bound to meet lots of Royal Marines and their families where you are.
Yeah, they really are. I have a very sort of normal story. So I grew up in sort of London, Surrey, and went down and joined the Royal Marines. I had left by that point, and then I met my now wife. This is maybe 10, 11 years ago. Was
it at the Royal Marines School of Dancing, by any chance?
I did very well there. No, I actually crashed her birthday party in Exeter, which is probably quite a normal Royal Marine thing to do. So it was sort of through a loose connection in the Marines, turned up to her birthday party, and ended up staying. And she didn't kick me out, luckily. And we got married about 2 years ago, but all of her family are down towards that constituency. So when we were going through the process of looking where to go, obviously I had a deep connection with that part of Devon. My dad's side had originally come from that part of Devon as well, and then my wife was there, so it made complete sense to go for it, and I'm so happy I did.
I think also you're my niece's MP because she's at Exeter University. I think she's living in your patch, but I'll ask
Brilliant.
her about how good an MP you are, or perhaps.
Please do.
But of course, your route, like many, your route into politics was, I'm really proud to say this show and the stuff that we've done to inspire those to stand up and serve again, and the storytelling of others is really, really important, because unless you see it, you can't be it, right? So to see other veterans, this started for me way back with Johnny Mercer. I think the first recording I did was back in sort of 2020, around about that time. And since then we've recorded, I think, 90 plus interviews. But for many also, the route into Parliament includes local government. And I think you stood in a local government election too. And what was that experience like? And what did that teach you and prepare you for going on to other things?
So I cut my teeth trying to do the local government work. So when I was thinking about getting into politics, this must have been about, 2019. I'd gone to the House of Lords to do an internship. So I just finished a master's degree, and I was considering all options. So I thought, right, I'll go dip my toe in the water, and I went to go work for a peer called Lord Karen Villamoria. And then I went completely sideways. I went into a different line of work for 3 or so years, and then that's when I started listening to your podcast, because the politics idea was still there. And I was really fortunate to be in Cheltenham at the time. And Alex Chalk, who is the MP, who was the former Lord Chancellor, Justice Secretary, he was fantastic. So Alex was fantastic, and he took me under his wing, showed me what campaigning was, the mechanics behind campaigning, like leafleting, knocking on doors, working with the tech that comes with it. So being able to sort of like record data. And then also how the party structure works, and understanding the route to selection, and understanding how to become a candidate, and then to look for seats afterwards. Because it can be quite a convoluted process to people that haven't seen it. And it's different party by party. But that was a really good opportunity. And then I stood in the local elections. It was at a time where the Conservative Party wasn't doing great. So it was around the time of Partygate. And I remember it was vitriolic on the doors. It was difficult to campaign. And I think as a sort of first exposure, it felt really hostile. But to be able to cut my teeth in that environment during that period, I think to do it in a bad environment, first of all, it makes everything else a lot easier. So I'm really grateful for that experience. And then I also took on other roles within the local association. So each party will normally have a local association, and then they'll have different voluntary jobs within that party structure. So I took on the role of deputy chair political, so understanding how to structure campaigns across an entire borough or a town or a city council. And then working with other council candidates or incumbent councillors and helping them run their campaigns. So I think all of that in conjunction, it put me on a good footing to be able to put my hat in the ring for a general election.
That journey is really refreshing to hear, because I've spoken to a lot of people that simply say, I want to be an MP, and then follows a whole heap of challenges from me and sort of an interrogation around that. But what you've just described there is the graft, the curiosity as well, seeking advice, seeking out people. And because there are a whole heap of people like yourself that are going to be really free and able to offer advice and help people along the way to follow them into this quite interesting career and interesting job. So I think that's a real message there, is anyone that's interested in this, absolutely, we inspire people to stand up and serve again, but be curious, seek out support, seek out advice, but be prepared to do the graft too, because there is a whole, don't just expect to, because you're the best candidate that's ever presented themselves, you might be, but everyone's got to do the graft too, and to simply go from service right into politics is very unusual. It's not impossible, and we've got the likes of Al Khans, Dan Jarvis, even Johnny Mercer that did that kind of route. But actually, behind it is the hard yards to go out there and do the work. So I think that's a really important message in what you've just described. And of course, you eventually were successful in getting elected in a general election. I think you've got a majority of 121. I mean, what was that count like?
Not fun at all. So stupidly, I got married in the first week of the general election. So going back to that point, so my wife and I have been together for 10 years. And we thought we'd been really smart. We thought we'd get married in the June and have a few months to sort of just enjoy married life. And then I'll get onto the campaign trail. And we thought the general election was going to be in November 2024. And it didn't work out that way. So the general election was called at the end of May. And our wedding was planned for June the 1st. So it was a stressful time. And if I ever needed any confirmation that I was with the right person, wow, I got it in spades during that campaign. She was fantastic. She just picked everything up. She said, look, you need to focus on the general election. And I'll just do everything else. So I was travelling back and forth. So we were supposed to be on honeymoon. We had a mini moon near to where we got married, and I was having to leave her. Yeah, exactly. I was having to leave her during the day to go back and campaign, and then come back in the evenings. But that was a stressful period, and then obviously going into the counts at the end of the campaign, and I grafted for like a good year beforehand. So I sort of scaled back with work, and I was really, really grafting. And I knew it was going to be tight. And although that seat has traditionally been Conservative, I think it's been Conservative since, 1835, I knew this election would be really difficult coming in as a Conservative. But I wouldn't stand for any other party. I am a Conservative. I'm not going to just put my name to a party that I don't believe in their ideology just so that I become an MP. I would do it the proper way. And I knew it was going to be tough. And on the night, I was just super fortunate to be able to get through. And I think as a first-time sort of general election candidate, to get through, I was super fortunate. And it came down to those small margins. And I have other friends that lost their seats by similar margins. And I just, luck plays into it a lot.
Well, I was at a count that night in South Northamptonshire with Sarah Bull. And my wife was, because my wife was her agent, but Lydia was Alicia Kearns's account. She was her agent as well. So I volunteered just to, oversee a count. And I can tell you now that in that constituency of South Northamptonshire, deemed one of the safest Conservative constituencies historically in the country, the nerves around that room for the Conservatives were just as palpable. So I can only imagine for yourself, with such a narrow majority, what that must have been like. I mean, was there a recount, or was it done on the first count?
No, so there was a bundle check, so checking that everything had been done. But it was like 7 o'clock in the morning by this point, so everyone was exhausted, and the initial number that came back was higher. They went back and did a bundle check, and then it went down to 121. So it was super tight. But look, I had the view. I genuinely care about the country. I care about the area that I live in. And if it wasn't going to be this time, I would just stand again in another general election. It was my first time standing. I didn't have the sort of hubris to think that I would get in straight away. But it comes down to public service. And I know that a lot of people that will be listening to your podcast will have the same view, that they're getting into it for the right reasons because they genuinely care about where the country's going. So for me, if it wasn't going to be this time, it'd be next time, and this would just be a good place to cut my teeth, to learn the ropes, and I would stand again. But I'm very fortunate to have got in the first time.
You've kind of led on to this next question actually, and I always ask people, what's their why? Was there a moment? Is there something that stayed with you, perhaps from childhood, or was there a person that inspired you to go into politics? What was the spark? What was the moment where you went, do you know what? I need to do this?
I think I grew up and public service was always a big thing that my parents tried to impart on us. And then at school, public service was talked about very heavily. And I have no doubt that shaped my decision to join the Marines when I was 18. And then I think if I look at the other jobs that I've had, all the jobs that I've had have been sort of public service-esque roles. And I think after finishing my masters, it got to the point where I was like, I want to serve in a different way, not in the military, and politics is the right route to go forward to make real lasting change. And then I sort of, like I said, I went into other jobs. I worked in the sort of national security environment for a while. And I remember reading, and I probably shouldn't say this, but it was another former Royal Marine, but it was a Lib Dem. So it was Paddy Ashdown's book.
Oh.
And there was a line in Paddy Ashdown's book where it said that you could be doing these types of jobs, and then you start to feel like you're kicking someone else's can down the road. And if you start to have ideas about where you think things need to go, and you have a plan of where those things should go to, then roll your sleeves up and get involved. And I think it got to the point for me, so I was working in the national security environment, and you're very close to policy, you're very close to central government. And I think I started to feel more and more in that environment that, okay, I'm seeing where things are going, and I want to try and help out, and I think I now have the sort of the tools in that tool set to be able to contribute effectively. So I thought, right, the easiest way now is just to go for it. This might lead to nowhere, but I want to do it, and this is for me it's real public service. To come into Parliament, you can actually affect change. So rolled my sleeves up and just applied. And I'm really happy I've done that. I think coming into Parliament, that hasn't diminished in any way. And I think being in a position where you can pick the things that you want to work on. So obviously you have all the local stuff that you will campaign for beforehand, and you have the ability to work on that at a local level and then see how that sort of like plugs into the national picture. But on a national level, I'm doing a lot of defence work at the moment, and you can see that you can have direct influence on how things play out. Just by crafting a good argument, by lobbying the right people and connecting the right people. And I try to do that in a cross-party way, always, because I think the state of play that we're in at the moment, nationally and internationally, I think people are demanding more cross-party unity. So I think coming into this environment, it's just extreme public service. And I know that a lot of people that I serve with, they would do the exact same thing. I have no doubt. They would come in and they would do a fantastic job.
Perhaps not as extreme as parachuting, which I know you've done a lot of in the past as well in your service. Or was it? Did you do wingsuit stuff as well? Is that all right?
Yeah, I did a lot of wingsuiting. Yeah.
Oh, wow, maniac. But when it comes to the cross-party nature, and again, a lot of people don't realise this. They think it's so, Punch and Judy, so adversarial, and it is when it's played out on the TV, particularly at the moment. But the functions of Parliament that you've been involved in, I think you've been on a couple of committees, including the International Development Committee and the Armed Forces Bill Committee, close to the hearts of a lot of our listeners. And we've seen the functions of those committees, those kind of things really play out in some of the national debate at the moment. And you're also on the all-party parliamentary group, I think, on foreign affairs. So what's that like when you're working in that more collegiate cross-party way on things that you care about so much?
I think a lot of people, their view of Parliament is they might see a snippet on Prime Minister's questions and they see people behaving badly and shouting at each other, and that's not representative of Parliament. So a lot of the work is done in committee rooms, in sort of deep, dark places in Parliament, where people are working cross-party and they're looking at legislation and they're going through line by line, they're scrutinising it, they're debating it, and they're trying to improve where the country's going. So we've just done the Armed Forces Bill. So with Al Khan's number of Labour MPs and Lib Dems, and that was to go through and look at things like service justice, service housing, around defensive drone use for bases. And this is serious work because this will have a real impact on how people live their lives in the military. And to be able to do that in a cross-party way and find consensus and do it through a position of lived experience is massively important. And that's the representative part of Parliament that I don't think a lot of people see, but that is how Parliament functions.
And I think that explains why we need people from a range of backgrounds, including defence, to be able to go through lived experience. And you alluded to those skills as well that you have, that you've been able to bring to the job too, because it's really important that we have a wide range of people in politics. I think we're starting to see that people have been frustrated with kind of the special advisor class. I think in the last Parliament, it was something that like 20 odd plus % of MPs had come from a special advisor route into politics, or pure politics route, which was just too high. You need some of those types, of course, but it was just too high. So it's really refreshing to know and to explain to our listeners that actually this is how it actually works in practice, and particularly helped when you've got familial relations, albeit they might be on different party, the other side of the house, as it were, but to be able to go up to Al Khan's in the corridor as a Royal Marine to Royal Marine and have perhaps a different kind of conversation that others may not be able to have, which is really, really good. And I always say it's a bit of a human bridge, the armed forces. I think there are 40 plus members of Parliament now that have an armed forces background, 14 veterans of Afghanistan as well in Parliament. So I think it offers an opportunity to act as a human bridge across political divides. So that's really great to hear. So as we kind of draw to a close, David, and I really appreciate your time because I know it is very busy for members of Parliament. But on a human level, what's it like? One thing I like to ask MPs, the maiden speech, that first time you're going to take to your feet in the chamber. What kind of emotions do you go through and the preparation for that moment? Because you're only going to get one maiden speech like. What was that like?
Nerve-wracking. It definitely was. I think the House of Commons, and I've maybe been, a handful of times before entering Parliament as an MP into the House of Commons, and to be in there and have the sort of aura of the place, for it to be quite busy. And for anyone that's been, the House of Commons is a lot smaller than you actually think it is. And when you pack loads of people in there and you sort of feel the heat from their bodies and you can hear all their whispers, it becomes quite claustrophobic, which is a fantastic environment. It really is. If you go in there, if you have the opportunity, do it. But to go in there and give a maiden speech, knowing full well that will be marked down in history, that all the people that come after you into that seat will look back at those words that you've uttered, to know that your constituents will be watching, to understand where you're hoping to go and the measure of the person you are. I felt a lot of weight and responsibility on my shoulders. So I put a lot of time and effort into crafting what I thought was a good speech. Others could sort of deem what they want. But it was brilliant. My parents came along, my wife was there as well. And to be able to look up and see everyone, it was an immense sense of pride. But I think coming in, I think the biggest feeling was that weight of responsibility. And I think uttering those words, knowing full well that you have to do something off the back of it, they're not just words. I really felt that, and I still feel that now. And I think that drives me. I think if I ever stopped feeling that, I would probably know it's time to leave Parliament. But it's real responsibility.
Well, I'd urge anyone to look up maiden speeches, and particularly David's. You can find them on YouTube, and they're really interesting. And particularly when you look at them several years after, because you'll see how people develop as well in Parliament. We've spoken about Johnny Mercer, someone that's inspired a lot of people into politics, and his maiden speech in terms of delivery was, you wouldn't have marked it a 10 out of 10 in terms of oratory, but you would absolutely have marked it 10 out of 10 in terms of content and passion. And we saw him develop as a speaker over the years as well during his time, and I think that's really right, that it's stuck in intent, that you've got to back up those words as well as just say them, and that's an important message. And as we close out, anyone that might be listening and think, do you know what, I've listened to David's story today, I fancy it, local government or serving in their community, or indeed going into Parliament, particularly those from an armed forces background, but they might be from any. We have lots of non-military people that listen to this podcast. What would be the kind of things that you would suggest to them in terms of that curiosity that might help them go forward and look at standing up to serve again in their communities?
I want to see a lot more people with military backgrounds going into these public service roles. They have so much to give. And if I just think about the process, the easiest way to do it, rather than umming and ahhing, going back to that simple point, just roll your sleeves up. Just like the military, just roll your sleeves up and get involved. You're going to have to throw a lot of stuff at the wall to see what sticks. But if you really care about your community, you care about where the country's going, just get involved. Whichever party you choose, work out which one you want to go for, because you have to be part of a political party to get anything done, really. And then just go for it. Understand the process. Speak to other people that you've seen that have done it successfully, and just get involved. It's massively important. And I think going back to that lived experience point, you have a lot of people that just want to be a politician for being a politician's sake, and that lived experience maybe isn't there. But if you speak to any military person, the range of experience that they've had, to bring that into public life again, and then apply it to their own area or to the country, it's so powerful. And I'd urge anyone to get involved if they're thinking about it.
And talk to their families, particularly if you're about to get married.
Exactly.
Well, perhaps we'll
Don't do what I did.
Perhaps we'll leave the last word to you, David, in thanking your wife for her extraordinary commitment.
Yeah. I thank her every day.
I'm sure you do. David, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. And for anyone that's interested in looking up David, we'll put some links into his website in the show notes. And don't forget, stand up and serve again, even if you're not a Royal Marine.
Thanks, Johnny. Appreciate it.